Do you recall the time where you were self-aware enough and relationally aware enough where you first recognized somebody really listening to you, like above and beyond how you've ever been listened to before? For me, as I tried to answer the question, first person right away comes to mind is an old friend, Rick Nanninga, who was an associate pastor in a church that I grew up in. And this guy was the listening human being. He always had time if I phoned him. He made time to meet at a coffee shop to talk. Never rushed when we talked. Always maintained good eye contact, right? Never did the shoulder check over your shoulder and looking at a clock or somebody else because they were bored with what you were saying. Never happened, or not in my knowledge happened, with Rick. He asked questions, showed that he was listening to what I was saying. He was just this amazing listener. He felt, I could tell he was feeling and engaging and empathizing with my life. A huge gift as a human being. And when I think back on him, I think that is like Christ's Spirit living in a human being, in that kind of listening. It's like that's what Jesus must have in some way looked like, or how he would have looked at you when he was listening. And remembering all about Rick, I thought, he's in Ontario, but I got to get a hold of the guy, right? So I spent 10 minutes, 12 minutes looking all over the internet trying to find his email address and wanted to send him a note and kept looking and couldn't find his email address. And I didn't want to phone him because that would take 40 minutes and I was busy. And yeah. So this is me, okay, regarding listening to other people. Used to be worse. I thought I really thought at a time in life that listening was just the time when other people's mouths moved so that you could work on the next eloquent thing that you would say. Ancient Egyptian proverb says, when hearing is good, speaking is good. And even though I know that there's a huge listening deficit in our culture, and I meet people again and again and again who are dying to have somebody hear them, really hear them and know them, and lend their ears to them, even though I know that's true, I find myself struggling. And even though I know that faith-wise, God's admonition is be more of a listener than a speaker, through his follower James, he wrote, "Let everyone be quick to listen and slow to speak," instead of quick to speak and slow to listen. And even though I know that Jesus said, "So in everything, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, listen unto others as you would have them listen unto you," even though I know all those things, I have this problem with doing listening well. It's like I've got all this interference at play, muffling the acoustics, inhibiting my ability to intake. And it's not physiological. I don't have a problem with my ears. It's bigger than that. Although Fran did once send me to a hearing clinic to get my ears checked, and I thought I had to go because I was missing what she was saying all the time, and it was a source of tension, not racial tension because we're both of the same race, but it was a sort of tension between us in our marriage, and she, it was causing friction. Like, why don't you ever listen to me? And I thought, I got to go, right? So I get off to the clinic, and they put you in the padded booth, right? And boop, 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 and doing all the sounds, and they print out the report, and I'm going to go home and at least have some justification before my wife for why this is happening. And on the charts, they have 50 to 60-year-olds here to this level, and then 30 to 40-year-olds are in the middle, which is where I was, and I thought I'd be there. And then they have up here the kind of hearing you have at 5 to 7 years old when it's still perfect and you haven't heard any jackhammers. And I was scoring above the 5 to 7-year-olds. My hearing was near superhuman. All right, so the self is a problem in listening. Another problem for me is unjust stereotyping of people when I listen to them. I've got this tendency to judge and prejudge and put into boxes, as though you could put any human being into a box, but to put into boxes other people when I engage with them in relationships and in conversations. And when I put them into that box, it's always too tight and so small, the acoustics suck for them, and they lose their voice in my mind and heart. I used to be much worse at that, because now I'm a Christian pastor, and you can't imagine a church or a Christian pastor judgmentally doing that towards other people. But in the past, I would often think one way and act and communicate in a totally, often opposite way in listening and engaging into a conversation with people. A coworker would walk into my office, and I'd be sitting at my desk, and I'd lean forward, and I'd look like a really good, attentive manager, listener. I'd smile, I'd make eye contact, and they'd say, "Hey, John, I just want to bounce something off you." And I'd say, "Sure, I'm your guy. Like, what can I do to help you?" Then they'd explain their problem to me, and I'd nod at all the right times, and I'd ask a probing question or two and maybe try to help them clarify their issue. And then, as they waited for my wise advice and care-filled response, I'd offer up some half-baked answer to their situation and say anything to get them out of my office so I could get on with what I wanted to do. And as I'm doing that, the critical interfering noise is huge and muddying. How could you ever listen to another person when you've got those kinds of altar conversations going on? Critical thought and backstabbing thinking, that kind of chatter will undermine any ability to communicate and to listen to another human being. We need to learn to turn that off and replace it with another way of thinking, a different approach to another person. I need to love them enough to empathize, really empathize. Step into another person's shoes and actually feel what it must be like to be them in that circumstance that they're in. Actually see that they're human beings made by God in the image of God. I mean, the faith thing really ups the ante in terms of who you're actually listening to. And replace the critical noise with more complimentary chatter. Gracious observations like, "She looks troubled. Maybe I could go to her first and say, 'Are things okay? Do you need some help?'" He's maybe not the most aggressive type A type guy in this company, but hey, thank goodness for that. But what a gift he is in terms of how he supports what we do in the office here and serves other people, You get that kind of positive, complimentary critique going when you listen to people. All of a sudden, the acoustics improve immensely. You love people. I've learned this lesson. You don't see good in people and in your world and in life unless you love it. The more you love it, the better it looks, and the more of its goodness, innate God-given goodness, you can hear and see. This is what we're all about here, right? Through Christ, God empathized with you, got into our shoes. St. Augustine wrote, "God stoops to our ears